Here we go, it's finally coming. Hey everyone, it's Russell Matthews here, and a decision is about to be made that's going to affect every single Canadian, and it's going to affect things like when benefits like the CRB and the CRSB, CRCB, when those are going to end, whether or not there will be a push into UBI in the future, direct support and payments to parents and seniors, as well as how we could pay for all of those things. We're finally going to get an answer on all of this. Canada's Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, just announced that on April 19th, they're going to finally reveal Canada's budget. And before you start thinking, okay, Russell, this is a budget, it's just going to be a bunch of boring numbers. No, this is why it's so interesting. Inside of this budget reveals where the government's going to actually put their money in the future, and it's going to show whether or not they're going to put their money where their mouth is on a lot of these past promises. Now, usually these budgets are released once every single year, but because of the pandemic, we haven't had one in almost 2 years. That's the longest in the history of Canada. So this is a big decision because it's going to show what the government is planning on doing for the future, how they're going to hope for Canada to rebound, and who's going to actually receive some help from them. So in this video, we're going to talk about what's likely to be included in this budget and what each individual political party is pushing for the government to actually include inside of this budget. But before we dive in, make sure to take a look at the links in the description where you can open up your very own investment accounts and take your wealth into your own hands, and subscribe if you haven't already done so to keep getting Canadian content just like this. All right, let's dive in. So when they announced that they were about to release this budget, all the other political parties were like, hey, now would be a good time for us to let the government know what we expect to be inside of this, and if it's not in there, we're going to be pretty pissed off. So let's start with the Conservatives and what they're hoping to see inside of this budget, and some warnings that they've actually put out to the Canadian government about how they actually roll out this budget. Here's part of a letter that the Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole wrote in response to the announcement of this budget. He said that, as Conservatives have stated, you have asked Canadians for a blank check without presenting a budget to show how or when you plan to use that additional borrowing capacity. I note that this historic and massive increase in our country's debt also includes $100 billion for additional stimulus measures. That's over the next 3 years. Now, despite repeated requests for you to explain how and where this money will be spent, you refuse to be transparent about your plans. This is right in line with what the Conservative Party has been pressing the Liberals on over the past months. It's been a consistent Conservative talking point saying, hey, we haven't had a budget in 2 years. We haven't had a budget in 2 years. And now it seems they're finally going to get one, but they sort of want to rub it in a little bit longer that, hey, we didn't get shown this plan in the way that you were going to spend your money. Maybe finally we're going to get some clarity on this. And make sure to stay tuned till the end of this video, because after we go through all the individual political parties, we're going to go over some clues and some hints that the Prime Minister may have sent to the Minister of Finance that could reveal what is exactly going to be inside of this budget. Also, inside of this letter, they said, hey, you need to make sure to avoid new taxes, make incentives for attracting business investment, and a fiscal anchor or a target for managing the federal debt and reducing the size of the annual federal deficit. These comments essentially line up with the platform that Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives have been putting together in anticipation of a potential spring election that many analysts are believing is going to happen, potentially as a result of this budget being announced and the sort of pushback that could be seen in the House of Commons as a result. Now, they're focused really heavily here on the deficit and how much spending there is, and there's actually some reason to believe that we may be heading towards a debt crisis, or at least many people believe that. I made a video about that whole idea, so check out the link in the description if you want to learn more. Now, on top of this letter, we can also take clues as to what the Conservatives want based on the speech that Aaron O'Toole, the leader of the Conservatives, gave at their National Policy Convention just last week. He was very focused on rolling back the benefits that have been laid out for Canadians since the beginning of the pandemic, things like the CERB, the CRB, the CRCB. These supports and these business supports, the Conservatives believe, hey, yeah, we needed them at the time, we need them right now until the end of their current longevity, but we got to make sure that these don't continue into the future, and we need to responsibly wind down these benefits. So that could be something that they push for as well. As for Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, well, their priorities are a little bit different, and they decided to hold a press conference to comment exactly on what they want to see in the budget. Let me show you.
We want to see three clear things. First off, we want to see a priority on making sure all Canadians are vaccinated, all hands on deck approach to get everyone in our country vaccinated as soon as possible. Secondly, we need help for people. That needs to continue. And the things that the Liberals have promised to do, that includes that includes pharmacare for all, that includes childcare, and additional supports that we were pushing for, which includes dental care. And then thirdly, we want to see a plan that answers the question, who pays for this? The cost of the pandemic and the cost of the recovery. We know that it should not be families, it should not be workers, it shouldn't be small businesses, but we know who it should be. It should be the ultra wealthy, those that have made billions off this pandemic, those at the very top, the wealthiest corporations that make profits in Canada, but don't pay taxes here. They should be the ones that are paying their fair share. So those are some of the things we'd like to see in the budget.
So they're making their priorities pretty clear here. Now, the first one, they're basically saying, hey, well, we can't do anything if we don't worry about getting through this pandemic first. We need to focus on getting things back to normal, getting people vaccinated. That's the main NDP idea. Now, the second point they bring up is emphasis on other NDP policies that, of course, they've talked about before in the past. The first one being a national pharmacare. They're also looking for a national childcare plan to bring childcare to people all across the country. Now, since the beginning of the pandemic, females have been disproportionately affected because of having to care for children. Now, with a national childcare policy, the NDP believe that this is going to help women get back into the workforce, and as a result, it could boost our economy as a result. And they also ask the same question as the Conservatives: who's going to pay for all this? But the NDP's answer is a lot different than the Conservatives. The NDP are pushing this idea that we need a wealth tax. The wealthiest Canadians should be paying for all of this excess spending, along with the businesses that have seen increased profits throughout the pandemic. They should be the ones footing the bill for this huge amount of spending. Now, it raises concerns about whether or not these kinds of taxes would actually be able to raise enough money to pay for this spending. We haven't been able to, as a country, pay for all of our services just based off of our taxes that we've been able to collect in a long time. We pay for them in things called Government of Canada bonds. This is how the Government of Canada raises billions and billions of dollars, and it's all largely due to the way the Bank of Canada is buying $4 billion worth of bonds every single week right now in Canada. But that's a topic for a different video. If you want to learn more about that, I'll leave a link in the description. Now, previously, the NDP have announced their support for the cancellation of student debt for many students of up to $20,000 per student, depending on their income. Now, they don't mention this in this press conference about the budget that's upcoming, so they might just be saving that in their pocket for when an election comes around for them to sort of campaign on that, hoping that the Liberals maybe won't include it in their budget so that they can sort of push that idea when it comes time for an election. But we kind of have to take this NDP position with a grain of salt, because at the very same time as they're saying these ideas and these plans, they've also said, hey, we are going to actively look for ways for there not to be an election. Essentially what that's saying is that they're going to support the Liberals' budget no matter what. They don't want an election right now. They say it's because they don't want people to be focused on the election when they should be focused on the pandemic and getting through the end of the pandemic, but some critics say that this is because the NDP wouldn't be likely to do as well as they'd like to in an election, and they may be just sort of trying to make sure this doesn't happen right now. Now, if the NDP don't go against the Liberal government's bill and don't sort of push for any changes to it, it's unlikely that there's an election unless the Liberal government says, hey, we want to hold one, we're going to be the ones to start it all. Now, as for the Bloc Québécois, it seems like they're going to push the hardest for future support for seniors. There was actually a motion debated in the House of Commons last week or the week before that, where they were proposing that the old age security for seniors be boosted up and that the age to receive these sort of boosts is lowered down to 65. Now, this motion was successfully passed in the House of Commons, but because it wasn't a motion that was put forward by the current government, it doesn't actually force them to do anything. It's more of just like a way of saying, hey, on this date, the House of Commons agreed with this motion, but it doesn't actually mean that anything's going to happen. Now, this was from Question Period just yesterday. I watch every single one of these to sort of sift through the information for you so I can bring you the most important information so you don't have to watch an hour of this every single day they sit in the House of Commons. But here, this is the leader of the Bloc Québécois, and he's going to ask Justin Trudeau about his plans for seniors. Let's listen in.
We're going to try again with yes or no in the answer. People are listening closely. Mr. Tremblay is 67 years old. He lives in Rimouski. He wants to know if in the budget there will be an increase in pension for seniors with no discrimination. not something that's only going to start after age 75. Yes or no, if seniors between 67 and 75 will see increases in their pensions.
So you can see that they're really, really pushing for this support to be included in the budget based on the questions that they're asking to the Prime Minister directly. Now, Trudeau responded to this question in the way that he's been responding to it for the past months, saying, hey, we've already provided support for seniors. We've given them a one-time payment at the beginning of the pandemic, and we have said that we're going to increase support for seniors in the future, but only for seniors over the age of 75. Now, the Bloc Québécois wants to see this lowered down to 65 so that more seniors who wouldn't be eligible otherwise would now be eligible. This seems like their main focus leading into this budget, and we're going to see exactly what that support's going to look like on April 19th. Now, admittedly, the Green Party holds a lot less influence in the House of Commons than these other parties, but nonetheless, they've been able to push out their ideas for what they think should be included in the government's future policy, chief among which is, of course, their environmental concerns, but likely that's going to be included by the Liberals. They seem to be on the same page for a lot of those things, but one hot-button issue is their support of UBI, or a guaranteed livable income, as well as their ideas around affordable housing. These are the things that they've been holding press conferences on, holding roundtable discussions on. It seems that these are the policies that they want to see included inside of the budget.
This was a time when we could have been working on some permanent programs rather than this continued patchwork that we're dealing with. And so many people have fallen through the cracks during COVID-19, so many businesses as well. And I'm really happy to see the NDP and some Liberal members who are supporting guaranteed livable income now. This is something that we've been promoting with the Green Party since 2006. And economic studies show that it will actually increase employment and increase economic activity.
So it's clear that they're strongly advocating for a program like this to be included in the government's future policy. Now, as for whether or not something like this could actually be included, we need to take a look at exactly what the Liberal government has put out and the hints they've left of what could be actually inside of this budget. And so for that, we're going to take a look at the mandate letter that Justin Trudeau, the leader of the Liberals, sent to Chrystia Freeland, the Minister of Finance, the one putting together this budget. Inside the mandate letter, it essentially says, hey, this is what I want you to do. Now, it doesn't say exactly what individual programs and specifics are going to be inside of the budget, but it does give us clues. So let's take a look at that. So this is from the desk of the Prime Minister, and it came out at the beginning of January. This is something that he does for all of the federal ministers, all of the different people in charge of the main portions of the Canadian government. He'll send them out these mandate letters roughly once a year to tell them, hey, this is what I expect from you. This is what you should be doing. So for Chrystia Freeland here, let's go over some of the points that he's included in here. He says that our actions must focus on creating new jobs and supporting the middle class to preserve the strength of the economy. Then he goes on to say that even though we're fighting the pandemic, our top priority is the pandemic, but we need to keep on thinking about climate change because it threatens our health, our economy, our way of life, and our planet. So they're going to be looking for ways that they can implement funding and spending to support clean energy, potential support for jobs that increase the ability for Canada's economy to be largely transitioned into this new green economy. And here's one really interesting point that's included inside of this mandate letter. We're going to read it all. So he's saying to Chrystia Freeland that we need you to preserve Canada's fiscal advantage and continue to be guided by values of sustainability and prudence by presenting a plan to regrow the economy and presenting a new fiscal anchor to guide this work. You will use whatever fiscal firepower is needed in the short term to support people and businesses during the pandemic, and will keep supporting the economy with emergency measures until the economy improves. Doing so, you will avoid creating new permanent spending. You will also lead the creation of resiliency agenda for Canada's longer-term post-pandemic economic recovery, including actions to transition to a greener, more inclusive, and more prosperous economy. You will also just review our debt management strategy. So to translate this to the way we actually talk, he's essentially saying, hey, look out, we're going to spend a bunch of money in the short term, but we want to make sure that this spending doesn't actually become long-term spending. Now, this could be news when it comes to the programs and benefits that many people are receiving, like the CRB, CRCB, EI. They don't want to create new permanent spending. This means that it's less likely that inside the budget we could see something like a new program like universal basic income be included or talked about inside of the budget, because that goes directly against the mandate that Trudeau sent to Chrystia Freeland. So that's why this is important to read, because it gives us an idea of what are you actually thinking about as a government and what can we actually expect. So that's a big point there, that they don't want to create new permanent spending. Now, they want to make sure things are greener and more inclusive, so we could see funding to those areas, making sure that our workforce is broadly made up of different representations of Canadian citizens, making sure it's not just white men who are thriving in the country. Of course, that's an emphasis that has been in Canada for quite a while, and even more support for that in the future. Now, as for the fine details on what's actually going to be included inside of this budget, well, we're going to have to wait until the budget comes out on April 19th. I'm going to cover that extremely thoroughly here on the channel. You can expect a live stream on the day of, so mark your calendar for April 19th. We're going to be covering that because it's going to be essentially the most important decision for Canada going forward. Now, we're also going to make videos about all of these different details that are going to be included in the budget, so if you want to keep up to date with all this stuff, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you can know exactly what's going on here. And I want to know what you have to say about all of this. Let me know down in the comments. I read all of my comments. I try to reply to a bunch of them. I'd be interested to know what you as a Canadian think about all of this. Where do we need to be prioritizing things? Should we be still spending and creating new programs, or do you think that we are kind of heading down a nasty road of federal debt and we need to more focus on getting things back to a balanced budget? These are all different ideas that many Canadians have, and I'd be interested in knowing what you have to say about it. Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you haven't already done so, check out the links in the description where you can open up your own investment accounts. It seems more and more the only person you can depend on for your financial future is, well, yourself. So if you haven't already started investing and looking into that sort of side of things, make sure to do so. And with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. This channel is supported by viewers like you. Thanks, channel members.